You finally decided to level up and start shooting in BRAW, but how to set up your camera for the best results? Today I will go through the most important settings in your BMPCC 4K. Let's go quickly through the recording screen. So here the FPS, I set it typically to 24. Then the shutter, I keep it at shutter angle 180 degrees. It gives me the consistent shutter angle for the frame rate that I use. The aperture depends on the exposure, the same with ISO. Typically I stick with 400, so the native ISO that gives me the least noise. Then white balance. In BRAW you can leave it how you want and change it in post-production. I set it typically to 5600 kelvins. And let's go to settings. Today we will focus on Blackmagic RAW because that's the main reason that I bought this camera for. It gives you a very flexible image. Here we have another two main choices: to record in constant bitrate and constant quality. I mainly shoot in constant bitrate 5:1 because it gives good balance between the quality of the image and the file size. The smaller the number, so for example 3:1, the better the quality of the image and the bigger file size. And for example 12:1 is the worst quality, so the biggest compression. If you choose constant quality, Q0 is the best quality and Q5 is the worst quality. Think of constant quality as somewhat variable bitrate. It lets the camera decide if the scene needs more details and will be less compressed, or if the scene is simple and it will save less data for it. Then we can choose the resolution, so it's quite straightforward. I typically shoot in 4K DCI because it gives me the most data and later I can crop how I want. But remember that if you choose, for example, HD, so a smaller resolution than your sensor is, the image will be cropped. You can see it here, it says sensor windowed. Let's go to the next page. Here we can choose dynamic range of our video. I recommend using film because it gives you the biggest dynamic range, and that's what this camera is all about. Using extended video and video gives you less and less data in your image, especially when it comes to colors, highlights and shadows. The sensor area is grayed out because we are using BRAW, and then you can choose the project frame rate. But later we can set the off-speed recording. If you turn it on, you can change the value here. And it's a great function because it lets you record in, for example, here 60 FPS, but your video will be slowed down by the camera itself and it will play back at 24 FPS, so at your project frame rate. It's also set under this key, so high frame rate, and if you click it, you will start shooting in off-speed recording. So it's really good to do those slow motion shots easily. I used it a lot when I captured white animals. If I wanted to make a quick slow motion, I just clicked it, corrected the exposure and started shooting. You can see it here, it says 60/24 FPS. But remember to turn it off. Then we can set the preferred media for recording. So for example, if you're using CFast card, SD card and USB, you can choose which one is the preferred one. Then we can set the time lapse, so it's quite straightforward. You can set the interval between the frames here as well. Then detail sharpening. I recommend keeping the sharpening off because you really want to sharpen your image later in post-production. It gives you much more control. Then this setting is really important. You can set it to stop recording when the camera drops frames. Now let's go to monitor. Here you can choose the settings for both LCD and HDMI output. I don't have HDMI output, so let's focus on LCD. And here you can set a lot of settings. To change those settings on the recording screen, you can click here in the corner, and here you can set first zebra. I have set it to 95, so I know that if my image is too bright, I get these zebras all over the place, and then I know that it's probably too bright to record. If I lower the aperture, it disappears. Then the focus assist. It's very helpful. Those are those red lines, and those let you know that you're in focus. I have it set to 50 because it doesn't cover all my image, but lets me know if it's sharp or not. Then the false colors, something that is very, very powerful, and I have it actually set to this function key 1, and it lets you know if your image is exposed correctly. I will make a separate video about just the false colors and how to use them, but basically you see that if something is red, it's overexposed, if something is purple, it's probably underexposed. It means that the data is lost in shadows. On the next page you have status text, and this is all the information on the screen. So right now there is just the video, but if I move the finger down or up, you can also change it here. Then you can choose to display meters or codec resolution. If you change it to codec and resolution, you will see Blackmagic RAW 5:1 and resolution right here, but I keep it at meters because it gives me this histogram and the audio meters. And now we have important setting. In the setup, you can set the shutter angle or shutter speed. I really recommend to set the shutter angle because then, as you can see here, you can see the 180 degrees. And it's really powerful because it lets you have the cinematic look no matter the frame rate that you're using. So I really recommend to set the shutter angle. If you set shutter speed, then you have to input the amount yourself. So for example, if I'm shooting at 24 FPS, I have the shutter set to 180 degrees, so 1/48. But when I choose high frame rate, it doesn't change to 180 degrees, so I have to change it manually. So that's why I recommend to keep it at shutter angle. Next, when it comes to function buttons, I have F1 set to false colors, F2 set to display LUT, and F3 set to grid. Everything is set to toggle. I'm going to show you how it works. So when I click F1, I have false colors as I already showed you, so I can quickly make sure that my exposure is great. Then I can click display LUT, and actually the exposure here is quite messed up. They should be much brighter, but it lets me see how the image would look like when it's not washed out, kind of like when it is color graded. And at the third button I have the grid that lets me see if my composition is correct. If you want to know more, check out this video next, and if it helped you, leave a like and subscribe, it really helps. Thanks for watching, and remember, let your films be shot by reality.